We're broadcasting live from the Phelps County Ag Center in Holdridge on both KFXL Fox Nebraska and KPTM Fox 42 in Omaha. I'm Colleen Williams, and in just a few minutes, we are going to hear from 3 of the Republican candidates who are seeking your vote to become the next governor of Nebraska. But before we begin, I'll toss it over to my co-anchor and tonight's debate moderator, NTV's Dave Greek. Dave.
Thank you, Colleen. First, a quick overview of tonight's format, which the candidates were previously sent. They are aware of how this is supposed to operate. They do not know the topics nor the questions. Our panel of journalists are asking each candidate the same question, and later there are specific questions for each individual. We're giving everyone 60 seconds to answer. We're going to do our best to not repeat the question for time purposes, so make sure you're paying attention when they ask a question. We're also having questions from our live audience and you, the viewer, via social media with the help of Colleen. Candidates get 4 30-second rebuttal opportunities. If someone would like to respond to another candidate's specific comment, raise the rebuttal card on your table. You can hold it up. The rebuttal must wait until all of the candidates have answered the question that is currently in play. If all 4 rebuttals are used, he or she will be unable to do so for the remainder of the evening. We've got the rules listed, so here are the panelists. KRVN Radio News Director Dave Schroeder, Kearney Hub reporter and columnist Mary Jane Scala. Finally, NTV Good Morning Nebraska anchor and executive producer Sarah Kirkley. And now to our candidates. From our left, and Mr. Lindstrom, you will be answering the first question tonight. Current State Senator Brett Lindstrom, former State Senator Teresa Thibodeau, and business owner Charles Herbster. For the remainder of the debate, we ask those in the audience to please hold their applause until we conclude. And without further ado, tonight's first question comes to us from KRVN News Radio Director Dave Schroeder.
Thank you. Senator, if elected governor, what are your top 2 priorities that you want to complete in your term in office?
Thank you. And there's a lot of concerns that we have across the state of Nebraska. We tackled a lot of those over the last several years, and we just passed the biggest tax cut in Nebraska's history, and I was proud to work on that bill. But as we move forward, we have a lot of issues dealing with workforce in the state of Nebraska. My 2 top priorities are infrastructure investment, and when you travel the state of Nebraska, which I've been to all 93 counties, rural broadband is top of the list. We cannot have young people stay in the state of Nebraska without connectivity. We can't innovate. We can't grow without that. The other part of the investment would be with roads funding. As you travel the state with deficient roads, highways, the 2-lane highways, we need to expand to 4-lane and invest in working with counties to do that. Both of those are so vitally important to growing Nebraska. And so as an investment, those would be 2 of the top issues amongst many, many things that we need to get done in the state of Nebraska.
Thank you, Mr. Lindstrom. Mrs. Thibodeau.
Here's my top 2 priorities for Nebraska is not only the much needed actual property tax relief that we have been looking for decades, but in order to have economic growth, we need to shrink the size of government. Government continues to increase their budget. They continue to increase red tape, making it so hard for everyday Nebraskans to succeed and to start the businesses and bring in the employees we want. And we're growing so much government. Heck, if we grew food as much as we grew government, nobody would ever go hungry. So with less government, less red tape, we can grow our economy, we can grow our businesses and our farms, and we can offer the much needed tax relief that we have waited for so long.
Mrs. Thibodeau, thank you. Mr. Herbster.
Thank you. It's great to be here tonight, and if you're here from Holdridge and around the area, give yourselves a hand. What a great crowd. I'm going to take a minute because I want to welcome all of you here. So it's great to have you all. We need tax reform. We have a tax code 1967 that is outdated, and if we're going to grow Nebraska, my motto is economic growth and prosperity. We have to change our tax code system. We have to rewrite it from the bottom up, and we have to develop an attraction to not only keep our young people here, but to attract other people to bring businesses here. And to do that, we need to brand and market every single thing that we do in this state, that we grow in the state, that we manufacture in the state with a little red silhouette of Nebraska, and we need to brand the living daylights because we have the best opportunity and the best state in this world
Thank you,
to
Mr.
live in
Herbster.
this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Thibodeau, the next question will come to you first, and it comes from Kearney Hub reporter and columnist Mary Jane Scala.
Nebraska has the 8th highest property taxes in the country, according to Wallet Hub. We want to hear the specifics of your plan to give property tax relief.
Nebraska has had a horrible property tax problem for decades, and every year it has been tried to be addressed over and over, but it can't. It never succeeds because nobody has taken the brave, bold move that I will take to address property tax. That's to do a deep dive into every level of government and find the waste and cut the inefficiencies and curb the spending. It is to get rid of our school aid formula, to get rid of TIOSA, and fund our children per student. And that does two things. It gives immediate property tax relief, and it ensures that every child in our state receives the same amount of money for their education, because every child in our state is worth the same and deserves the same amount for their education.
Mr. Herbster.
As I said earlier, you have to rebuild it from the bottom up. You have to have total tax reform. It has to be revenue neutral. It has to be fair-based. But along with tax reform, we have to grow the population. In 2021, we lost 7,000 people in this state. Seniors are moving out of the state, and seniors at the other end, those people are retiring, are leaving our state because we have a tax code that is driving business away and is driving our young people away, and there's no reason that Nebraska can't be #1 in ag technology and ag production and all the things that we do in manufacturing. We have everything here we need. We just need to utilize it.
Mr. Lindstrom.
Well, I was happy to support, again, another $580 million that we passed just 2 weeks ago for property tax relief. But of course, we're not done with that. My plan is to tackle what is the biggest property tax issue and how it correlates to K through 12 education. We have a huge disconnect right now that is causing an urban-rural divide. With 244 school districts and 87 of those school districts getting equalization aid, 157 don't. And when you look at your property tax statement, you'll see that 60 to 70% of that is K through 12. So my plan is to direct sales tax dollars into an educational trust fund where we can provide 20% property tax reduction in a very short amount of time.
Our first rebuttal comes from Mrs. Thibodeau.
You know, as far as tax relief that has been done in the legislature, there's been good tax relief, but my opponent up here also supported the gas tax and did support an education bill that would have increased the sales tax. My education plan does not increase the sales tax. And that sales tax bill was written by the education union. I will stand up against the union.
Mr. Lindstrom has a rebuttal.
The plan didn't increase any sales tax. What we did was we carved off existing sales tax dollars to put it into an educational trust fund. And over a number of years, that would create equalization aid to all 244 school districts and would provide 20% property tax relief on average. In some cases, it would be more, some cases, it would be less. But I worked on and just passed the largest tax cut in Nebraska state history, and I've cut and slashed taxes in my 8 years as a state senator.
The next question goes to Mr. Herbster, and it comes from Sarah Kirkley, who is the NTV anchor on Good Morning Nebraska and an executive producer.
Hello, candidates. Let's talk jobs. Nebraska has consistently reported the lowest unemployment rate in the country, but with that comes labor shortages. What will you do to attract new workers to the state and keep existing ones, especially in places here like rural areas?
Well, I can tell you right now, when you look at what Governor Kristi Noem is doing in South Dakota, when you look at what Governor Kim Reynolds is doing in Iowa, both of those states are beating us to the punch. They're getting people that are coming in, starting businesses, developing businesses. We're not doing that in Nebraska. And I know we've said it already before, but it comes back to the fact where we're one of the top high tax states. It's the perfect thing that keeps people from wanting to live here and stay here. And when the children graduate and leave, it's not too long afterwards that grandmother and grandfather leave, and sometimes mom and dad leave, and that's what we have to do. We've got to rebuild a tax code that's attractive for people to be here in Nebraska and stay here.
Mr. Lindstrom.
Well, the first thing is to change the motto that Nebraska is not for everyone. That's not sending the right message to the people outside of our borders that want to come here and work here. And there's a lot of opportunity with people in Colorado and abroad that want to come and work. We have 60,000 unfilled jobs. The next step in this tax plan, after what we just did this last year, is to really target that working class and taking on what would be the threshold. So my plan is to make sure that we, from a $50,000 single filer and a $100,000 joint filer, we continue to work to get to a 0% income tax rate that allows us to compete with the South Dakotas, with the Wyomings. Iowa's doing a 3.9%. Even though we passed this big tax cut a couple weeks ago, we're still not done. And that is the next step in retaining and attracting people and working here. The other thing is to incentivize training programs, incentivize apprenticeship programs, really tailor it to meet the needs of the local community, local businesses. I've done it as senator and I'll do it as governor.
Mrs. Thibodeau.
Well, as I travel the state, whether it be small business, farming, or manufacturing, all I'm told is if we could have our property taxes reduced now, so not put it in multiple years, done now, and we can do that if we get rid of TIOSA, it will be an immediate 50 to 70% property tax relief for anybody who owns property. And we will be investing in our children. And while we invest in our children, we can set up dual enrollment in a better way with the community colleges. We can show children that there are options in trades, in business, and in four-year degrees. And when I talk to people, they say, if you remove the red tape that is so costly for me to do business and you lower my property taxes, then I have enough money to invest in the community and make sure people stay here. And that our old people stay here too, and we don't end up losing nursing homes that are so important to us as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Thibodeau. The question begins with you again, Mr. Lindstrom. Dave, your turn.
Senator, between redistricting and major funding for eastern Nebraska projects, and some senators have voiced concerns about rural parts of the state being left behind. All of you live in eastern Nebraska, so what will you do to make sure the concerns of central and western Nebraska are heard?
It's a great question. And one of the things that I have done and will continue to do, and this goes into my property tax plan and education reform plan, is that think of Thedford, Nebraska, who doesn't, people in Thedford who don't get equalization aid. If I'm paying my sales and income tax dollars to Lincoln, I have commodity prices going down and valuations going up, I'm not going to feel too good about the situation with this urban-rural divide. I think the first step is addressing the TIOSA formula and providing that equalization aid to all school districts. But we need to make sure that we're incentivizing local communities, the doers that do in those communities, and that ties into rural broadband, it ties into workforce housing, it ties into childcare, all of those things that need to be met across the state of Nebraska, and in particular in rural Nebraska. Nursing shortages, law enforcement shortages, all those things matter, and the things that we're going to tackle and spend the most time on to grow and address the concerns in rural Nebraska.
Mrs. Thibodeau.
I think it's very important that every portion of our state is represented in the governor's administration. And I have already started that and showing that I am there to bridge that urban-rural divide by choosing a lieutenant governor that comes from the rural area of our state. That is to show my commitment to both rural and urban. Because if our whole state isn't healthy, then nobody is healthy. And that goes back to our education and not reworking TIOSA. We have to get rid of it, or we will never have each of our children being funded the same for education. And it's also knowing that your administration, no matter where you are, should have representation from both urban and rural, and that people have one person that they can talk to that shares the same experiences as everybody does in their part of the state. And if we divide our state up into regions and we focus on the economic drivers of those areas, we can succeed.
Thank you, Mrs. Thibodeau. Mr. Herbster.
Well, first of all, I'm thankful to say I'm from District 3, even though I'm on the east side of District 3. Born and raised on a ranch and on a farm. I can just share with you that there's 49.2 million acres of land mass in Nebraska. 44.2 million of those land acres of the 49 are totally related to agriculture. When you look at agriculture and per capita of our population, we are absolutely beyond question number one in agriculture. And we have to address the situation that we've already talked about, and people are ready. I've crossed the state time and time again. I've talked to people in the cities. I've talked to people on the west part of the state. People are ready to sit down. One of the things we have to look at, again, as I look at the tax plan that South Dakota has, they have very few exemptions. Nobody wants to talk about exemptions in Nebraska. We have huge numbers of exemptions. As governor, we're going to address those.
The next round, Mrs. Thibodeau, will be led by you. Mary Jane, your turn.
There's been a recent push to absorb the Department of Education into the umbrella of state offices that report to the governor. Do you think the department should report to the governor, and what should the state lawmakers' role be in K-12 education?
I do not believe that we solve government problems by adding more government. The State Board of Education is an elected board. I believe in giving voters the choice, because truly the voters are our second house and they should be heard. And removing that Board of Education removes the voice from the voters and puts it under the office of the governor, who then has total control over our education. I suggest looking at the board members that serve on the State Board of Education, researching them, becoming an informed voter, and vote the bad ones out of there. Vote the ones that want to control your children, that want to take away the parents' right to their child's education, and get them out of there. But if we put it under the office of the governor, those never start off small, they never work out well, and I would be afraid that our children would suffer because of that.
Mr. Herbster.
America's under attack for three reasons. Number one, our faith is under attack because we've removed prayer from all the school systems. Our families are under attack because today we have more and more unwed women with children, no dad in the house, no family unit. And thirdly, we're under attack because our freedoms are under attack. You moms out there are not terrorists. I want you to share that with you. You're the ones that we need. And as governor, I'm going to ask you to join me in making sure that we know what the curriculum is in our school systems. As governor, there will be absolutely no critical race theory in this state, and we are not going to do mandates in this state. We're going to enjoy the freedom that our forefathers fought for America.
Mr. Lindstrom.
I'm opposed to moving any more power to the executive branch, to have an appointment to the State Board of Education. You might like it one day, but 20 years down the line, you might not like the governor or whoever's in charge at that time. So I'm very reluctant to support anything that would move more power to the executive side. What I want to make sure we do is empower the parents to make decisions for their kids. As a dad of 3 young kids, it's important to me that we empower those parents, sitting down, working with the local officials, the teachers, the principals, and the school board members to build that curriculum to meet the needs of not only the community, but the future of our kids. And so, no, I would oppose any type of suggestion or movement to put the power in the hands of the governor.
Mr. Herbster, this next round will begin with you. Sarah, your turn.
More Nebraskans are having to drive further for access to health care and assisted living facilities. Please tell us what you would do to ensure all Nebraskans have access to life-saving care.
We're going to have to invest in western Nebraska. We're going to have to invest in health care. We're going to have to reinvest in those things that are necessary so people in that area don't feel like they have to drive clear across the state. That's why I've said in any tax plan that we're going to have, it has to be revenue neutral, but I realize there's many areas where we're probably spending and wasting money, but there's other areas we're going to have to invest in. We're going to have to invest in our patrol. We're going to have to invest in our sheriffs. We're going to have to invest in already been talked about broadband, good roads. Those are all the things that are going to be necessary if we're going to attract business and attract people to come here. And I can tell you, we can do that. People will come.
Mr. Lindstrom.
I think part of that equation is dealing with the rural broadband, especially when we're talking about telehealth, teleeducation. Again, traveling the state of Nebraska, I've seen nursing homes, assisted living homes close, the hospital in Oakland, Nebraska close. One of the biggest things that we need to do is make sure that those provider rates are increased to meet the needs, in particular in rural Nebraska. We have an aging demographic in our state. I was happy to pass the Social Security tax cut that puts more money in the pockets of 325,000 seniors that can spend more money for food, for health care, for meeting their needs. And so we're going to need to invest in making sure those provider rates meet the needs of our rural communities, but also the workforce issue. Again, we have a huge shortfall in nurses. And it's not only creating that pipeline of making sure that they stay there, but we need to recruit and retain. And what that means is probably a tax credit or some type of incentive to make sure that we have the necessary healthcare workers in rural Nebraska.
Mrs. Thibodeau.
Well, our critical access hospitals are of the utmost importance because they serve our communities. And first, I would like to do a study to make sure that when patients need to be in the hospital longer than 72 hours, they can stay right there in their community. And that helps the patient heal. It will also help keep those community access hospitals going. And for the nursing homes, I talked to someone yesterday, she's had to move her mother 3 times. That is so hard on families. And yes, they lost them due to not having enough workforce. But a lot of the workforce left because of the mandates of the federal government. And Medicaid reimbursements are low. And what I have seen on my side is that there are some providers who receive more in Medicaid reimbursement than others. And under my leadership, that will not happen. Every provider will receive the same reimbursement from Medicaid.
Thank you, candidates. At this time, we're going to turn our questioning to the audience, whether it be here or chiming in via social media. And Colleen, there's a lot of questions coming in, so I'll leave it to you for the first.
Our first question, what is your stand on medical marijuana?
And Mr. Lindstrom, we'll start with you again.
Sure. So I've had the opportunity to make votes on this in my 8 years as a state senator. I have supported medicinal cannabis. There's really 3 reasons why I have supported it. One is when I was walking 10,000 doors and talking to many individuals, a lot of veterans doors, I went to a lot of veterans doors and they had PTSD. It was one of the things that they used as something that would help them. The other is we've had a lot of moms come down to the legislature with kids with epilepsy. And I want to make sure that we empower those parents to make those decisions. And I have supported that, and with moms coming down at that as well. The other issue is dealing with the opioid crisis in the state of Nebraska and preventing more of the narcotic side of pain medication versus medicinal cannabis. I think we can do it in a very responsible way. This last year, we had, the previous year, we had a vote. A lot of senators, we started off the day with 20 votes. By the end of the day, there's 31. I want to make sure that we put the parameters in place that we protect the kids, but also have the option to provide that for the people that need it the most.
Mrs. Thibodeau.
There was a bill presented just this last session in which medical marijuana would be available in a pill or liquid format as prescribed by a physician. And I get it, that can be helpful for children that are having seizures or for PTSD or depression. But medical marijuana that's allowed to grow in your home or be brought in from other places isn't true medical marijuana. If we want to pass that, then we need to make it a medicine like every other medicine that we receive. Then that opens the door for the black market as well if we're trying to put recreational marijuana under the guise of medical marijuana. And when we open that door for the black market to come in, we're seeing a lot of marijuana come into our country laced with fentanyl, and that is killing our children.
Mr. Herbster.
Just last week, coming across our border, 12 pounds of fentanyl. Most people don't realize that 12 pounds of fentanyl is enough fentanyl to kill the entire population of Nebraska and South Dakota combined. Every single person. We could spend 3 hours on both sides of the case of medical marijuana. Just go to Colorado, ask the state patrol, ask the sheriffs, ask the people in Colorado what the pathway was with starting out with medical marijuana. It's going to go on, and it's going to be voted on in November. And I think it's one of those issues that We need to empower the people to make the choice. And if the choice in November is that we'll have medical marijuana in the state of Nebraska, you can be assured that as governor, we're going to tax it, and that's going to go all directly to relieve property
Thank you, Mr.
tax.
Herbster. Mrs. Thibodeau, this next question will begin with you.
What are your thoughts on Jim Pillen not participating? And if you are the winner of the primary, will you commit to a debate with a Democratic candidate for governor?
I think it's a shame that Mr. Pillen is not participating in any of the debates. This is a good time for people to learn our thoughts and ideas and how we would react to situations in a leadership role. As governor, you don't always have the answers beforehand when you are faced with a situation, and you have to be prepared to address the communities at any given moment, not even knowing what is going to happen. I think it's a disservice to our citizens, and I think that it shows that he's not going to be available to you, the citizen. And as a citizen, I'm sick of not being listened to by our elected officials. And that's one of the reasons that I stepped into the race, because I would like to return the power back to our second house, which is you, the citizen. And so many times I just hear people saying they've been forgotten about, they're not listened to. And that's what I'm focusing on.
Mr. Herbster.
It's very difficult to lead if you don't want to communicate. And debating is part of communication. And I assure you, as the next governor of Nebraska and the individual who will win the primary on the 10th of May, I'll be more than happy to debate whoever the Democratic candidate is.
Mr. Lindstrom.
I'm not going to comment on Mr. Pillen's decision to debate or not debate. I think it's important that all of us standing here and given the opportunity, it's important that we tell what we're going to do, our agenda for the state of Nebraska. And so people can choose whether or not to come or not. I'd be happy to debate the Democrat, which looks like it'll be Senator Carol Blood. We've debated on the floor, and I'll be happy to do it again in the public square.
Okay, we have time for one more question from the audience. We will begin with you this time, Mr. Herbster. Okay.
What do you know about the situation with the Mead ethanol plant? Do you have a plan to help clean it up?
First of all, it shouldn't have happened. I was certainly not part of that in the beginning, so I'm on the backside of learning what took place there. But any time as governor of this state, we have a situation that endangers other people's lives, it's our responsibility to fix it.
Mr. Lindstrom.
Well, water quality is one of the things that we have in Nebraska above most things for natural resources. And making sure that we protect water, quality water. I've seen a lot of studies, a lot of things that frankly scare me about what's in our water. As governor, I'll make sure I work with the Department of Environmental Quality to address those concerns and make sure that we protect anything moving forward to make sure that our water quality remains strong, clean, and available for all of our citizens. And we will tackle that issue when I'm in office.
And Mrs. Thibodeau.
Water is one of the most important things in our lives. We can't live without water. And ethanol is important as well, but not at the stake of contaminating our water. And so, yes, I will be very much involved in ensuring that not only the water that we do have is safe, is that we continue to have access to water. If you look at what's going on right now and how dry it is, we're seeing the fires happening and we're just not receiving any rainfall. Not only do we need to protect the quality of water that we have now, we need to ensure that we can continue to receive the water to water our crops, the water for us to drink every day, because water does fuel us and it feeds us. And it's one of the most important things as governor that we will have to stand up and protect.
Thank you, candidates. Thank you, Colleen. At this time, we will turn now to our panelists for a very direct question for each individual. Each candidate will get this specific question for them, and the other candidates will not have to answer. They will wait their turn for their direct question. We begin with Dave, and this question is for you, Mr. Lindstrom.
Senator Lindstrom, ads have been targeting you, saying that you're no conservative. According to reporting from the Omaha World Herald, Governor Pete Ricketts has echoed those claims. Besides the most recent tax cuts passed by the Nebraska legislature, What in your past voting record shows that you have a reputation for being a conservative?
That's a great question. So over my last 8 years, I have been a strong supporter of pro-life. I've voted for every pro-life bill that's come before me. I was endorsed by Nebraska Right to Life. I have supported every pro-2A bill that's come out, so Second Amendment. I have an A rating from the NRA. I've tackled and voted for every property tax bill that's ever come before me. I'm not sure why people are saying what they do, other than I can only think that we're having a good showing. Anytime you do that, you tend to draw some fire. So I'm happy to draw that fire, but I'll stand on my record every day on being a conservative and supporting pro-life and Second Amendment issues, and being one of the biggest tax cutters that is on this stage and has been in this race.
We have a rebuttal, and because we are not in the questioning process where each candidate has to answer the question, you can rebut right now.
I would say why it's up for question. One, the gas tax. Another one, Senator Lindstrom voted against voter ID. And not only did he say it would cost too much money, he actually stated on his own legislative website that he voted against it because we've never had any evidence of voter fraud. And in addition, there was the sales tax that the education union wrote, and he has been endorsed by the NSEA.
Thank you, Mrs. Thibodeau. The next question will be coming to you from Mary Jane.
You started this race as a candidate for lieutenant governor, supporting one of the candidates on this stage. Why did you leave that campaign?
Okay, thank you. Good question. And I have stated that publicly before, that I saw a lot of chaos and disorganized. And I didn't see a lot of leadership. And quite frankly, with transparency and communication, it just wasn't there. And there were even times where the candidate himself emailed me and said, maybe we should switch the ticket and maybe I'm a better supporter. And as we moved down the road and those things could not become resolved, I decided to step out of the race.
And Mr. Herbster, this question will be coming to you from Sarah.
You have adamantly denied recent allegations of sexual assault. At the same time, all of the female senators in the Nebraska legislature have signed a letter calling on you to drop out of the race. Our question tonight, with your denial already on record, if elected, please tell us how you plan to work with these senators who believe that you have sexually assaulted one of their colleagues.
Well, first of all, I understand a lot about political smear and political hits. And I can share with you that going through the Trump campaign in 2016, being in the Senate chamber with Brett Kavanaugh for 3 days and watching what happened to Clarence Thomas, I understand what happens when you're leading in the polls and they want to take you down. I never hold a grudge, because as a born-again Christian, there's two things that are necessary to live, and that's to forgive, but more importantly, forget. And so I can work with anybody, even those individuals that have attacked me. I see no problem at all, certainly from my side.
Thank you, Mr. Herbster. At this time, we have had one rebuttal from Mr. Lindstrom, 2 from Mrs. Thibodeau, and none from Mr. Herbster. We are now going to return to the format where you all answer the same question, and we will begin once again with Mr. Lindstrom, and the question comes from Dave.
Previous governors have led trade missions outside of the United States. Is this something that you would continue to do? And if so, what countries would you like to target as trade partners?
Great question. And again, this ties back to our number one industry, which is ag. We have a lot of opportunity across the globe. I think sometimes we think just regionally, nationally, but Nebraska products can be everywhere. And in particular, when you think about a growing middle class, we want to keep the countries that we have those relationships with strong, Japan, Germany, and others. But I think it's important that we start to be aggressive in making sure that particularly Nebraska beef reaches places like Southeast Asia, Vietnam in particular. And those are the opportunities as we grow and expand and double down on what we're doing well in Nebraska, because we don't need to be all things to all people, but we certainly need to be and double down on things that we do well and open up more avenues and more trade. The more trade, more revenues that are derived from outside of our borders and globally, the better it is for all of us. It allows us to do our tax cuts. It allows us to invest in the state of Nebraska, and we'll be happy to lead the charge in an aggressive manner to make sure we open up those new avenues for our ag sector all across the world.
Mrs. Thibodeau.
Well, and absolutely, we have more cattle than people in this state, and there's no reason that we shouldn't be the producers of food for the entire world. We're the breadbasket of our nation, and we can be the leader. And I will absolutely continue those relationships to trade and work with the other countries in Brazil, in Asia, and everywhere in between that we have already been to. And then also working with how do we get more money in our producers' pockets. So the producers that are using smaller processors that are then putting that food directly to us, the consumers. Let's market that as well, because Nebraska can provide the food for the world.
Mr. Herbster.
Well, as governor, I'm going to change Nebraska's not for everyone to Nebraska's open 24/7. We are open for business. Second of all, before we go overseas, let me say as the beef state, the #1 state, anytime beef is served in the state of Nebraska, including Memorial Stadium, it absolutely should be all Nebraska beef, 100%. Thirdly, I've already developed a business in 13 foreign countries with bull semen and embryos, Mexico, Canada. I have the contacts necessary all across the globe to utilize not only our agricultural products, but our agricultural technology. If we continue to work with the university, we can be the #1 agricultural technology in the entire world right here in the state of Nebraska. That's very, very possible.
Mrs. Thibodeau, the next round begins with you, and Mary Jane has the baton.
We're going to talk about climate change. Right now, Nebraska's largest industry is battling extreme weather, fueling damaging wildfires, blowing away dry cropland, and a few years ago, washing some of that land away. What would you do to support farmers now and in the future as they battle these changes?
Our farmers are going through very, very rough times right now, and our farmers are the best stewards of our environment. They currently do that on a day-to-day basis. If they didn't, they would see their livelihoods go away. So as governor, I will ensure that our farmers have the water that they need to produce their food. When you look at what's going on right now with the fires, I will ensure that I go there and I listen, because people are devastated. They're losing their livelihoods. And I will make sure they have what they need to not only fight the fires and put them out, but they have everything they need in the aftermath, because it's going to be years to recover.
Mr. Herbster.
Well, I'm going to forfeit a little bit of my time because what's happened over the past few weeks in this state is devastating. I've been through fire in my own personal life. So I'm going to remove my cover, and I'm going to ask everybody to just bow their heads and let's have a moment of prayer, because let me tell you something that's far more important in this debate tonight. It is the loss of life, of livestock and property, and it's absolutely chaotic disaster in the state of Nebraska tonight with almost 100,000 acres that's been burnt. Heavenly Father, I just ask a blessing for those people tonight who have lost property, family, homes, buildings, and livestock, that you'll lift them up and give them relief and let them know that you are in control.
Mr. Lindstrom.
Well, I was happy to support Governor Ricketts this last session in making sure we met the challenges of the future with our water. This is something I brought up back months ago with the Farm Bureau debate in Kearney. As you saw the migration of Californians and others moving into Colorado, you could see that we were going to have a difficult situation with our water supply in the state of Nebraska, similar to what happened years ago when Kansas sued us in the Republican River Compact for $9 million. You could see it coming. And when we think about western Nebraska and rural Nebraska, protecting those irrigated acres and protecting our water, I was happy to support building the canal. We'll continue to support water quality, water investment to make sure that we provide that resource, because we've seen a drought, or we're going to continue to see a drought, and even our water tables have dropped over the years. So we need to make sure that we're protecting our water rights as Nebraskans, even if it means that we're going to have to sue Colorado and keep fighting Colorado to protect those producers in agriculture.
Mr. Herbster, this next question comes to you, and we will start with Sarah.
The identity of both major political parties seems to have shifted in the past few years. In your opinion, what are the values that make a Republican here in Nebraska?
It's the values that are shared by our forefathers that created the United States of America, the greatest country on the face of the earth. And there's no question in my mind the division, all the things that you're referring to, has come because we have lost our moral compass in America. And I think the number one thing that demonstrates that is in the first time in the history of this country, in 2020, we allowed our churches to be closed and locked. It never should have happened. We've taken, again, I said before, we've taken God out of the school systems, out of the boardrooms, and we're taking it out of every avenue. We have to get back to the moral values of God first, family second, and business third. Without it, we will not save the state, nor will we save the country. We cannot do it on our own.
Mr. Lindstrom. Hold the applause, please. Hold the applause, please. Thank you, Mr. Lindstrom.
Well, as a Republican and lifelong Republican, I believe in the platforms of self-reliance, of individual liberties and freedoms, and determining your own fate based on your own willpower and individual belief that you can overcome things. And that, to me, is really the principle of how I operate and will operate as the governor, is empowering people and the doers to do. There are times where the governor, working with the legislature, can walk alongside people, but from never top down, always bottom up, always thinking of, does this hurt the individual? Does this prohibit them from succeeding and living their dreams? And if it doesn't, then yes, how do we step alongside, either by cutting red tape, cutting taxes, supplying some type of tax credit, whatever it might be, to help walk alongside, but always from the bottom up, empowering parents to make decisions for their kids, empowering individuals to take those leaps and innovate and prosper, and take those steps to create a better future for themselves and for their kids.
Mrs. Thibodeau.
To me, being a Republican means first and foremost standing up for our Constitution and what our forefathers founded our country upon, in standing up for our states' rights, and the fact that both at the federal and state level, our lawmakers have given over so much power to bureaucracies. And as a Republican and as a governor, I will take that power back from the bureaucrats and put it in the hands of the people where it should be. And I will ensure that your voice is heard, and that any decision that is made at the governor's office will not violate the Constitution. It will not give more power to bureaucrats, and it will ensure that everybody has the opportunities to enable their dreams so that they can prosper. Because as a Republican, that's what I stand for.
Mr. Lindstrom, this next round of questions will begin with you, and it comes from Dave.
Senator, funding for the planning of the Perkins County Canal Project, which would divert water from the South Platte River in Colorado to reservoirs in Nebraska, was recently authorized for the planning. Do you support the project? And if you are governor, would you advocate for state funding to build the estimated $500 million cost?
Well, as I stated before, I did vote on that, and I did support what we did. Of course, it wasn't to the level of the $500 million that the governor requested, but we did take steps. Of course, we have a finite amount of resources in the state of Nebraska. We have to be cognizant of the fact that we can't do all things in a short amount of time. But I do think it's very important, like I said before, to make sure we're protecting Nebraska's water rights. And if it means suing another state and working to do that, I'll be happy to stand up with my Attorney General to accommodate that and push back on any state that would jeopardize our ability to grow agriculture in the state of Nebraska. And so, yes, I was happy to support that, and we'll continue to support that. We'll see if it continues to be a $500 million project, but we'll keep striving to protect Nebraskans' water rights.
Mrs. Thibodeau.
The Perkins Canal is set up to protect water for our future generation, because it wouldn't be completed for years to come. And it is going to be caught up in litigation for quite some time. And we will have to look at planning on a lot more money than $500 million. But as governor, I want to protect our water for our future generations, But our farmers need water now. And in fact, our farmers are great. They only need 6 to 7 inches of water to grow their crops. But if we look at what's happening right now with our weather and where we are in the dry cycle, I'm worried that they may not have that 6 to 7 inches to grow their crops for this year. And where will we go when we start seeing food shortages?
Mr. Herbster.
Well, I've been saying we were going to have food shortages for about 8 months, and it's coming, and there's no question about it. $500 million. I'm not a politician. I'm a businessman. I'm a total outsider. And if somebody's going to spend $500 million, I need to know a whole lot more than I think anybody in Nebraska knows right now. And I think as governor, no question about it. My first visit when it comes to water in the dam is going to be to the state of Colorado, because I want to be sure that we are not taken advantage of. Remember, I said this tonight, in the next decade, the #1 resource that will be talked about in Nebraska more than anything else will be our water.
Ms. Thibodeau raised her rebuttal. You have one more remaining.
As a candidate, I think it's very important to do a deep dive into our water issues because that's our most precious resource in the state. So I've already been to Colorado. I met with the landowners and the ranchers in Northeast Colorado, and they are scared too because Denver is taking all of their water. And they are scared that, you know, we may not have any water either. And they want to work together to make sure that our farmers have the water that they need. And I will continue to work with them. I already started building the relationship with them because as a leader and as a candidate, I do my research.
Mary Jane has our next question, and we begin with you, Mrs. Thibodeau.
Nebraska's prisons remain overpopulated and understaffed, but state leaders recently announced big progress in hiring. What is your plan for staffing and keeping prisons below capacity?
Our prison system has been a problem for years. The building is so outdated that it would cost more to fix it than it will to build a new prison. But in addition to building a new prison, I want to change the culture of the prison so that we can have prisoners in there who are getting access to the resources they need, but not at the risk of letting people out early just to free up beds. But if we can change the culture of our prison, we can recruit more employees. My human resources background helps me in those things to find out how to retain and keep good employees.
Mr. Herbster.
One building's over 100 years old. The other one was built totally in the wrong location. One of the things that I've been doing over the last 2 years is working with Jack Brewer and the Brewer Foundation. And we have a lot of people today who are in prison who, if we work with them and provide them when they get out a job, a way of life, and reform them in the prison while they're there, we've got a tremendous opportunity to relieve the pressure of some of that. As governor, we're going to have to build a new prison. There's no question about it, because there are a group of people in there that we don't want out in our small towns and in our communities, but we need to do both.
Mr. Lindstrom.
Well, we've taken one step towards addressing the wage issue that's gone on the state of Nebraska for a long time. We increased that to $28 an hour, but we do have a crisis going on. We have 152% capacity in the state of Nebraska. It's higher than most of the states all across the nation. One of the things I think all of us agree that we don't want to let violent criminals out. There's a line here between what we're going to invest in and what we're not going to invest in. And there's $270 million that we've spent on a prison. I'm not saying never, but I think we've given up a little bit on how to address the upfront challenges that we have. Again, there's a line between violent and nonviolent. $270 million, another X amount of dollars for operating expenses, it's going to get a lot more expensive. I'd rather see us focus on the recidivism percentage decrease and tackling the mental health issues that have gone on, tackling the addiction issues. We haven't provided enough skilled training, and it does become a workforce issue as well. Again, the line between violent, nonviolent, and those that can get some assistance through dealing with mental health and addiction issues, I believe that we'll have less of a recidivism percentage. Thank you.
Our final question tonight comes from Sarah, and we begin with you, Mr. Herbster.
Mr. Lindstrom just brought up mental health. More Nebraskans are seeking these type of services. What will you do to get these services to the places that need it?
In the Joe Hans administration, the regional centers to help our sheriffs, our patrol, were removed from mental health. Our mental health has exponentially increased. A lot of that is because of all the illegal drugs that are coming across the southern border. We have to close the border. We have to stop the drugs that are coming in. $1 trillion worth of drugs came across the border in 2021. We are already in the process of working with our veterans. We've put together a program for mental health with the veterans. We're going to expand that to law officers. So we're going to have to really invest some money and time and realize that mental health is one of the leading issues we have in Nebraska today. And we're going to have to address that and relieve the pressure, particularly in western Nebraska, where they have nowhere to go to work through the medication that it takes, which is usually 30 days.
Mr. Lindstrom.
Well, I think our nonprofits and healthcare providers in the state have done as good a job as they could do, but we're lacking in resources. Again, this goes back to the provider rates question that we talked about earlier. It also goes back into the investments that we need to make as a state. And this is why I keep coming back to one of my main top priorities is to make sure that we have rural broadband, specifically dealing with telehealth. Some people don't have access to those avenues, and sometimes we don't have those providers or those doctors or those physicians that can assist in that. They will reside sometimes in more metropolitan areas. But investment in rural broadband connectivity will first address some of those things, but we need to continue to build that out if we're going to be successful in dealing with this crisis. It all goes back to addressing that. That also leads into deal with the corrections issue. It all matters in how we do this and grow Nebraska, and we do need to tackle that because it's vital. We saw that exacerbated through COVID as well.
Mrs. Thibodeau.
We are going to see mental health exacerbated for quite some time because of COVID, because of what we're seeing going on with the fires, and looking at our children, and that there are a lot of suicide attempts and suicides these days, and it's devastating and it's sad to families. And how can we have those resources available? Telehealth is good maybe as a follow-up appointment, but if somebody is in a mental crisis, a telehealth appointment is not going to do them any good. I've also talked with sheriffs who have had to drive people in mental crisis around for 10 to 12 hours until they could find a bed for them to go to. And also advocating for mental health and letting the public know that it is okay to seek help. Because so many times people hide it because they feel like they will be rejected and society will reject them. So how can we reach out to those people? And we need to find those providers who will go into the mental health area to help treat those patients.
Thank you, Mrs. Thibodeau. Panelists, thank you for all of your questions this evening. Audience members, both abroad and here at the Phelps County Ag Center, we appreciate your questions. We move now to tonight's closing statements, the order of which were predetermined by a random draw. And former State Senator Teresa Thibodeau, we begin with you.
Thank you. And thank you for being here, residents of Holdrege, and thank you to Nebraska who has tuned in. It would be my honor and pleasure to serve as your next governor. It would time for Nebraska to have a tough female who will stand up, not only for our taxes, but for our children and for our freedoms. And in order to protect the great resources we have, to ensure that the federal government does not use their overreach to come in and take our land, or to use unelected bureaucracies to put down mandates on our citizens. And I'm traveling around this state and I'm listening. I'm in coffee shops, I'm in restaurants, I'm having conversations with everyday Nebraskans. We share our hopes, we share our dreams. And the overarching message I get over and over is, just could you have government get out of the way, not have them solve our problems, let them be opportunity makers so that we can live our lives and prosper. I would be humbled to have your vote on May 10th.
Thank you, Mrs. Thibodeau. Up next is Business In, Mr. Charles Herbster.
Well, Elon Musk bought Twitter today. We should smile. We should smile because he believes in freedom. Finally, we have someone on our side who invested money that believes in freedom. Very quickly, 3 things will take down a nation and will take down us as a state. And I want to leave you with one thought tonight, and that is this. If we lose America, where are we going to go? There is nowhere else to go. Right now, we're being attacked because we have lack of election integrity. You will lose a country if you don't have integrity of your election. Number 2, we have lack of law and order. As governor, I'm going to make sure that number 1, from the very first day, we're going to uphold, encourage, and we're going to honor our law officers across the state. Number 3, I've said it once, I've said it 100 times, the open border in this country affects Nebraska. They're coming in every single week. They're bringing illegal drugs. They're bringing sex trafficking. I can assure you, as governor of this state, we are going to realize that every state's a border state, and I'm going to send as many as I can exactly the same place that Abbott's sending them. That's to Washington, not here in Nebraska.
Thank you, Mr. Herbster. Applause. Hold them, please. Hold the applause, please. We have one more candidate to have a closing statement. Mr. Lindstrom.
Well, thank you to Holdridge. Thank you to the moderators, and thank you to the people all across Nebraska watching this this evening. This campaign is about experience and next generation leadership. The person that's going to be able to take on the challenges in front of us: tax reform, education reform, property tax reform, investing in rural broadband, investing in workforce housing, investing in childcare, making sure that Nebraskans can live out their dreams. And I've walked the walk over the last 8 years of doing that, passing the largest tax cut in the history of Nebraska, passing the tax to end the tax on Social Security income for 325,000 Nebraskans. I've done that. I've been a tax cutter. I've been a pro-life advocate. I've been a pro-Second Amendment advocate. And I would be humbled to earn your vote on May 10th. And we look forward to getting the job done, hitting the ground running come January, and executing and getting the things done that all Nebraskans are talking about and making us competitive. So thank you for joining us tonight.
I would like to thank all of the candidates, Mr. Lindstrom, Mrs. Thibodeau, Mr. Herbster, for participating, for making the drive to Central Nebraska. Not a lot of candidates seem to want to come out to these parts, so we appreciate your efforts in making the trip out here and spending time with us this evening. Thank you to our panelists for your great questions, for your concerned efforts, and your insight to the problems and the issues that we are dealing with here in Nebraska. This concludes tonight's debate. So again, we'd like to thank all of the candidates, everybody who made the way out here to the Phelps County Ag Center, not to mention those who are watching both on KFXL Fox Nebraska and KPTM in Omaha.